Well, hello. Today I'd like to talk to you about the book by Dan Simmons, Endymion. And since we've been talking about the covers, yeah, the artist got it wrong again. The Shrike should have 4 arms, and it still only has 2. But the get the focus better here. Standing on the raft, the people, let me uncover all this. All that is real. That all takes place in this book. But darn it, the Shrike has 4 arms, so let's get it right. But you can't judge a book by its cover. So I want to dive into this book a little bit. So this book is the third in the Hyperion Cantos. Previously I've done Hyperion, and I've done the Fall of Hyperion. And now we're going to fast forward about 300 years. This book was written in 1995. As always, I'm going to try to avoid spoilers for this book, other than, kind of the obvious. But I can't make guarantees about previous books, so if you have not read the previous books, I suggest you go do so and then come back to this review. There are a lot of spoilers about the first 2 novels in this book. So like I said, it takes place about 300 years after the fall of Hyperion, so the hegemony of man has fallen. Civilization is basically... had a weird error on my computer. Civilization has basically fallen all over, and what's going to rise from the ashes? Well, the end of Fall of Hyperion, we saw the destruction of the Farcasters, so instantaneous travel all over, gone. We also saw that the fat line was taken away from humanity, so instantaneous communication, gone. And so all of these worlds have been cut off for 300 years. And I will remind you that 300 years is a long time. My country, the United States of America, is less than 300 years old. And I would just suggest looking at what has happened in the United States in those 300 years. And all the other countries in the last 300 years. A lot of change happens in 300 years, especially if you're cut off. We live in a world right now that's very connected via the internet and satellites and so on. So, I enjoy the German TV series Dark. I enjoy British comedies and British mysteries. I watched, I forget what it was called, but it was Japanese. We watch entertainment from other countries, so we're much more connected. I have viewers on this channel from India, Wales, Australia, all over the world. So imagine losing that all of a sudden. Imagine I'm suddenly isolated here in North Dakota. And worse than that, my nice modern lifestyle, gone. Because we don't have the infrastructure to support it. That's what happened to all the worlds that were in the hegemony of man. Which is quite a shock. Now, the universe has changed by the time of Endymion. The Catholic Church, which was had become kind of a shadow of its former self. The microphone was backwards. We'll start this over. Actually, we won't start this over. We're just going to use camera audio for the beginning, and we'll switch to microphone for the rest of it. How about that? So the Catholic Church was kind of a shadow. It was on the way to disappearing into irrelevancy at the end of the Fall of Hyperion. And suddenly in Endymion, it is ascendant. What happened? Well, they are offering a compelling argument to join the Catholic Church because they're offering immortality. Who else is offering that? I didn't think so. So immortality, as much as Christians may talk about, their eternal reward and all that, they seem to be kind of afraid of dying. And immortality is quite an offer. So what it is is the cruciform that we saw in, especially in Father Dore's story in the original book Hyperion, where they had this cruciform parasite that was kind of cross-shaped and would embed itself in your chest. And then when you die, you would be reborn within 2 or 3 days. Always a little bit less, the mind a little bit more gone. If you remember the Bakura people in those 2 books, they had no genitals, no hair, very simple minds. The cruciform had done that to them. But somehow the Catholic Church discovered a way to make the cruciform confer immortality, bring back the body, and yet not cause all those other unpleasant side effects. And we don't find out in this book how they managed that, but we do find out that this is what they've done. And the book leaves open the question of how does conservation of mass fall into this, conservation of energy. And the book does answer that. Or I shouldn't say this book does, the next book does. So just be sure there is an answer. So at the end of the fall of Hyperion, Father Dore had become Pope, but now Father Hoyt is back as Pope. We don't find out in this novel what happened to Father Dore, except that he is mentioned as sort of the a bad Pope, bad guy, and kind of scary. So clearly, though, the cruciforms that they share have regenerated, and as we discover through the book, Father Hoyt has been Pope for most of the last 3 centuries. So naturally, if you're offering immortality, you're powerful. So the Catholic Church is very powerful in this novel. And yes, effective immortality is a pretty darn convincing argument. The book has us journeying to escape the Pax, which is the civil military wing of the church. We end up seeing a lot of what the Pax is doing during the journey, and we also discovered that the Technocorps, the big bad guys of the previous 2 novels, never really went away. But just like the last 2 novels, the Pax is at war with the Ousters. So more of the same, but things have changed. The main character of this novel is Raul Endymion. He's the guy who on the cover... Oops, let's focus here. Let's pull this back. He's the guy on the cover here who is poling the boat. So Raul Endymion is... yes, more reference to John Keats' poetry. So I'm glad that Mr. Simmons kept up that theme, even though I'm not much into poetry. As the book starts, he's a hunting guide on the planet Hyperion. He's very well read, somehow, and has a very diverse background. Military, shepherd, all kinds of different things. In this book, he's in his late 20s and really hasn't settled into his life. He's one of those people that just hasn't figured out what he wants to do with his life yet, so he just kind of bops from thing to thing. So at this point, he's a hunting guide. The importance of this opening is we're going to learn a lot about the universe under the Pax, because Raul Endymion gets put to trial for murder. And the victim of his murder testifies against him, because of course the victim had a cruciform, so he's resurrected. So yeah, we learn right away that death is not forever in this universe. Now, Raul Endymion has not taken the cruciform, so when he gets sentenced to death, of course, it's forever. He is offered the cruciform. I was really unclear, even after the 4th novel, why he never took the cruciform, but he didn't. I'll be honest, that would have been a very difficult thing for me to resist. And that's just a weakness in this book. But anyway, he gets put to death, but he gets better. Martin Silenus, who is the poet from the first 2 novels, is still alive on Hyperion and hiding out at a university at Endymion, which is where Rahl Endymion gets his family name. What Martin Salinas did is he paid some people to make sure Rahl Endymion didn't die when he was executed. So he hires him to take care of a 12-year-old girl who it turns out is the daughter, we're going back to the first book, of the Cybrid John Keats and Private Eye Bron Lamia. The little girl is 12 years old, is named Ania, and I might be pronouncing that wrong. Aenea. She had entered the Sphinx 200 and some years ago. So she was born a few months after the fall of Hyperion, basically, and lived to about age 12, and then entered one of the time tombs, the Sphinx. Fast forward 300 years, and she is as lost as the reader is. So right there in Ania, we have a nice viewpoint character, because she knows what's going on in the last two novels, but not so much what's going on now. So she has the same questions we do. So if you remember the console story in Hyperion with the flying carpet, it's still around, and Rahl Endymion rides it through the labyrinth under Hyperion to go and rescue her. And I don't think I'm giving you a spoiler there, because if we don't rescue her, we don't have a book. And then we meet one of my favorite villains, probably one of my all-time favorite villains. This is Father Captain Federico de Soya. I would say he ranks right up there in my mind with the lieutenant in Graham Greene's The Power and the Glory. Federico de Soya is a complicated dude. He's ready to capture Ania in service to the church, but he doesn't know why. And he has already in this book expressed disgust over the way the war against the ousters is being waged. And so really, just like the lieutenant in Power and the Glory, he's a fundamentally good man. So then we get a voyage in the consul's old ship, but for various reasons, which again, read the book, we end up on a raft following the old River Techys. Now the River Techys, again another reference to John Keats, used to be a river that connected world to world. And so you could raft along this river, and you'd be on one planet, then another planet, then another planet. You just keep going. And they use this Farcaster network to cause instantaneous transportation when you'd go under a Farcaster arch. And again, I refer you to the cover of the book, which, for all of its faults, I just focused on the wrong thing. There we go. For all of its faults, you do get to see a nice Farcaster there with a deserty scene while they're in this kind of jungly green scene. So, a lot going on there. Excuse me. So, they're also joined by an android who appeared briefly in the novel Hyperion named A. Bettig. I'm thinking A is short for android. He appeared briefly in the novel Hyperion. He was one of the ones that helped with the river barge, guiding it upriver on their journey there. So most of this book, other than the beginning where we've got the runaway in the spaceship, is runaway, only on a homemade raft made out of logs harvested on one of the planets that they visit. The one where they leave the consul's ship because the consul's ship is too damaged to fly anymore. So they follow the river. And I thought one of the horrifying things in it was they visit several worlds where all humans have disappeared, like mid-meal. And we don't find out why in this novel. There is an explanation coming, but not in this novel. And yeah, in the sequel, The Rise of Endymion, we do find out why, and it is properly horrific. As it should be. So what they do is they just travel from world to world on the River Techys while Father Captain Federico de Soya keeps trying to catch up to them. And I'll come back to him. He's got his own story that's very interesting. One of my favorite side trips on this whole thing was to a world that the hegemony of man had started to terraform, but, when the whole civilization fell, they had bigger priorities, and so terraforming stopped. The atmosphere began to freeze. So you have this civilization that's living in ice, basically. And they're hunted by ice wraiths, which is an alien species. But they also hunt the ice wraiths, but only the cubs, because the adults are too powerful for them to handle. And somehow these two civilizations live off each other. The ice wraiths eat the humans eat the ice wraiths, and I don't see how that's a sustainable ecology, but whatever. But really the big message there that you really learn with this civilization is that all of these planets in the past 300 years have started to develop their own culture, their own uniqueness. And if you remember, under the hegemony of man, a lot of that had been destroyed. So it's back. And, of course, there's very little travel between worlds, very little communication. And, worlds get to be unique this way. The Pax is threatening that as they come in and try to impose their Catholic religion on everybody through, the use of the cruciform. And we find out just how horrific that is in the next novel, but, And we don't get any word, if they're following the River Techys, who's operating the Farcasters and why? And how are they picking where to go, especially since some of the choices seem to be really bad choices. We don't get that answer in this novel, but we do get the answer in the next one. And yes, the Shrike does put in an appearance sort of toward the end as sort of a deus ex machina, but definitely a very much needed deus ex machina because Endymion just really can't fight the villain that appears at that point. So they're going by river raft made out of logs along this river on all these different planets and have all kinds of different merry adventures. Meanwhile, Father Captain Federico de Soya and his crew of 2 are traveling in probably the most unique spaceship I've ever read about. What it does is the spaceship accelerates very quickly to go between star systems. Well, when you accelerate, squish! You've all been in a car where the car takes off and you're like, whoa, it's like I'm being pulled back in my seat, when really it's just your inertia. You want to continue at that same speed, but the car is like, whoa, no, we're going faster. Multiply that by a few thousand times. That's what the spaceship's doing. Well, when you do that, splash, everything gets squished and destroyed. But they've got the cruciform. So they become goo, but these spaceships can travel very quickly from system to system and then resurrect the people using the cruciform. So later in the book, his crew, which has kind of been unsuccessful and has pissed a few people off, is joined by a woman named Radamanth, I think I'm pronouncing that right, Radamanth Neems, who the church tells him is an elite soldier from a new elite soldier group that they're creating. Mysteriously, we find out she doesn't go splash whenever they do high accelerations, and we find out why at the end of the novel. But overall, what we get to read about in this novel is a fascinating universe of planets that have been cut off from each other. We get to see the effects of immortality on this culture. We get to see the power of the church. And we get some real hints about a lot of things, like in the last... Sorry, there's a bug there. In the last novel, we learned about the lion, what they were calling the lions and tigers and bears, and basically there is a higher intelligence in what they call the void which binds, which is where the Technocore was hiding. Yeah, pretty strong suggestion they may be the ones behind some of what's going on in the novel. Now, the framing story behind this whole thing is that Endymion is writing basically a memoir of his life. He's inside of a Schrödinger cat box, which is a prison cell, and it has poison that's going to be released at random whenever this radioactive isotope decays. So if you know Schrödinger's cat box thought experiment, he has a cat in a box that's going to be poisoned if this radioactive isotope decays. If it doesn't decay, then the cat lives. But in the meantime, since you can't observe inside the box, is the cat alive or dead? Don't know. Quantum mechanics is weird. I'm a physics major and I won't claim I understand it. But anyway, so he's in a prison like that orbiting some planet. So as he writes this novel, he's neither alive nor dead. But we learn that right away that Ania, so that, I mean, I'm trying to avoid spoilers, but Dan Simmons gives away a lot of spoilers right at the start when he tells you that, oh yeah, Ania became a messiah later in life, you know, after she got over being 12. Rawl became her lover and disciple. Gotta talk about that one. Whoa, baby. Ew. And continued her work after her death. We learn all that pretty quick. So let's be clear. She's 12 in this book. 12. That's how old you are when you're in 6th grade. When you start 7th grade, you're 12. Ew! Because, you know, there's obviously got to be some time stuff going on later because, I mean, 12. Blech. Especially since he's in his late 20s. I mean, maybe if he was 12 it would be okay, but he's not! So, Dan Simmons has got to deal with that somehow. But I will say in this book, Rawl is never anything more than her protector. But I'm still weirded out. You know, when I wrote this review, I had just been to the bank and ran into one of my former students who now works there, and she still calls me Mr., you know, my last name. And what she told me is she just can't call her teachers by their first name. And I'll tell you what, I'm 45. I still can't call my teachers by their first name. It just, it's wrong. There's an age difference there. We just don't get over it. Even though I'm older now than some of them were when they were my teachers. So somehow the next book had better overcome this age gap and prior experience because it's kind of freaky. I'm not gonna lie. So I will say that they do overcome it, although as a teacher, I'm still weirded out by it. But, you know, one of my colleagues is engaged to one of my former students, and I've just got to remember, okay, he's a lot younger than I am. So he would have been in high school when she was in high school, so for him it's perfectly normal. But, you know, it's still just kind of weird to me. That's that teacher thing. And be glad that most of the teachers you know have that same attitude because, again, ew! So is this as good as the first two novels? I will say that the writing, it's a little bit less lyrical. The style is definitely a little bit different. It's definitely enjoyable. It's more of a traditional type of novel. This is a new novel with new characters. Yes, a couple of the old characters make an appearance or we learn about them. But I like that Dan Simmons said, okay, after the first two novels, let's close off that story. Their tales have been told. Let's deal with the consequences of those tales. So, yeah, this builds very well off of the last two novels. Yes, there is the ick factor with learning that this 20-some-year-old man will eventually be the lover of the 12-year-old girl, but let's trust Dan Simmons, who is a former teacher, to find an intelligent way to handle that. So I will talk about that in my next video. Because he better find a way to handle that one, because, ew! And yeah, I still have my issues with it, but at least it was something. Sorry. At least it was an intelligent way that I could deal with it. So we've got 2 more videos in this series coming. I'm going to do one more on Rise of Endymion, and I'm going to do one where I talk about the whole series as a whole and throw in all the spoilers that I want. And I will say that there is a lot in this series. Quinn has done quite a lot of videos on the different aspects of this series. So he's definitely one worth checking out. And I've been seeing several other reviewers just lately have been reviewing this series. So I don't know if that means anything. I'm not one of those reviewers of books or pens or anything that any company wants anything to do with, because I'll share my opinion and sometimes people don't want to hear it. But I kind of wonder if a number of booktubers are talking about this novel, if there's a reason. Is it... There have been several suggestions that this could get made into a sci-fi channel series or a movie. I don't know. But it's just kind of interesting that there's several booktubers who are much more popular than me that are doing videos on this right now. So anyway, I definitely another one to watch. Or sorry, to read. And we got one more novel yet to come. And again, I just enjoy this deep dive into a universe. And what I love about Dan Simmons is he leaves you feeling that there is so much more. He showed you this much of the universe, and there's so much more out here beyond it. And you go away feeling that, wow, that's a big universe. And we've only scratched the surface of it. So, he is a masterful writer. He won't say I like all his books, but if you look at my bookshelf right there, I got a lot of Dan Simmons to read. But what I'm going to be doing here, I've got one other science fiction book. Actually, I'm just going to review a whole series. I want to review, and then I'm going to dive out of science fiction for a while. I've got a very interesting book I'm reading right now. So, yeah, look forward to 2 more videos in this series, another quick science fiction video, and then a deep dive into a totally non-fiction topic near and dear to my heart. So thank you for watching. We'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.